The individuation process. According to Jungian psychology, individuation is a process of psychological integration. In general, it is the process by which individual beings are formed and differentiated from other human beings. In particular, it is the development of the psychological individual as a being distinct from the general collective psychology. The individuation is a process of transformation whereby the personal and the collective unconscious are brought into consciousness to be assimilated into the whole personality. It is a completely natural process necessary for the integration of the psyche. Individuation has a holistic healing effect on the person, both mentally and physically. Now, that all sounds great and wonderful in theory, but how do you actually accomplish this process? And once you've made it through the individuation process, then what? Some people think it is merely a goal that we are seeking but never achieve. Others think the end of the process leads to death. I am here to tell you that I know from experience what happens and who the self really is for each personality type. My entire life, I have been seeing people's true potential, but I didn't really know what it was that I was seeing until I myself was able to know my true self. Carl Jung was fascinated with mandalas, and he noted that there was a clear insistence in the dream on the four-rayed mandala, what he called the quaternity. Jung said the phenomenon of four is a spontaneous product of the objective psyche. The objective psyche implies a consciousness beyond but not separate from our individual psyche, a consciousness that contains universal information accessible to all, shaping all, common to all. Jung recognized the existence of the mandala in the objective psyche, with its power to manifest order from chaos. Edward F. Edinger, author of Ego and Archetype, says, "Quaternity mandala images emerge in times of psychic turmoil and convey a sense of stability and rest. The image of the fourfold nature of the psyche provides stabilizing orientation. It is an archetype of wholeness." The quaternity mandala is a symbol that represents the completion of the individuation process. It is the quaternity of our psyche. This is how we got the four sides of mind theory: the ego, the unconscious, the subconscious, and the superego working together as one to form the self. To help eliminate confusion of these four sides, I am going to use the words persona for the ego, as it is who our mind wants to believe is the real self, but it is merely a mask or a persona. The shadow for the unconscious, because as you work through the process, the functions in the shadow become conscious and you are no longer unconscious to them. The anima or animus for the subconscious, to represent your soul, which counterbalances your persona to find an equilibrium of masculine and feminine qualities within. And spirit instead of superego, as this is where you find truth from the ethereal realm, better known as enlightenment. This quaternity personality, which is the name of the personality test that I'm working on and I've trademarked, is achieved by bringing awareness and balance to all the functions. To do this requires you to access all areas of the psyche in a willful and orderly fashion. C.S. Joseph likes to refer to these access points as gateways to each of the four sides of the psyche. He tells you about four gateways, but he has yet to complete the process and is unaware of the fifth gateway, which reveals itself at the end of the process and is the gateway to the self. Many Christians today believe the Bible is the Word of God, and that Jesus is the Word of God in flesh, and that is because of mistranslations. Let's take John chapter 1 verses 1 through 5, which if translated correctly says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and God was the Word. This was with God in the beginning. All things through self came into being, and not even one thing has come into being without self. In self, life was, and the life was the light of men, and the light in the darkness shines, and the darkness has not overcome. The Greek word autos, which means self, and is the root word for things like automatic, is translated into English as him in the Bible, which is why people believe it refers to Jesus Christ. Hutos means this, not he, and is why people believe Jesus existed in the beginning, thus giving them confirmation bias of Jesus Christ being God in the flesh. Self is the center of the psyche, and it is autonomous and exists outside of space and time. It is pure consciousness. It is our true self when we reach the end of the individuation process. It is the part of ourself that has always existed and is directly connected to God. The first gateway is the gateway to the ego or persona, and it is through the hero function, which is our lead function that we use effortlessly from the beginning. This is the lead role in the majority of our life that is required to go through a death in order to be born again and experience your spiritual awakening, which is the abyss portion of the hero's journey, which is just another way to describe the individuation process. Jesus even tells you in Mark 8, verses 34 through 38, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. The words life and soul in the English translation are translating the word suki, which means breath, the soul, the self, the individual personality. It is the root word for psychology. This is talking about an ego death, and if you try to cling to the life of your personality, you'll lose your psyche, mind and soul, and it will be enslaved to the beast. The second gateway is the gateway to the subconscious, or the anima or animus, and it is accessed through the inferior function. This is where our fears and insecurities that prevent us from connecting with our soul lie, keeping us from finding real happiness. By avoiding this function, it creates an imbalance where the hero function is overused and results in grip states where you are forced to use the inferior function, but in an unhealthy and oftentimes destructive manner. Whereas if you face the fears and insecurities, you aspire into your anima and can experience life through your soul rather than through your fears. Remember, psyche means mind and soul. I use the ego and shadow as the two sides of the mind, which deals with the duality of this tangible world and is related to the 4D, which is the 3D spatial elements and the additional dimension of time. This is your space-time continuum. Whereas the anima and spirit are the two sides of the soul and are related to the spiritual world where you can access your spiritual gifts or extrasensory perceptions which go beyond the 6 senses of see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and intuition, and experience things like telepathy and clairvoyance, because this is related to the 5D, where space and time kind of fold in on each other and don't really exist anymore as they are merely constructs of the mind. The third gateway is the gateway to the shadow, and it is accessed through the nemesis function. This is where our natural worries and anxieties and sometimes paranoia stem from. These are not necessarily the worries and anxieties related to past experiences that result in PTSD, which is directly related to the introverted sensing function. If you bring awareness and use this function in balance with your hero function, you can pacify these worries by exposing the darkness of the unconscious to the light of consciousness and flip the archetype of the nemesis to the ally. The fourth gateway is the gateway to the superego or the spirit, and it is accessed through the demon function. This function is diametrically opposed to our hero function. The only way to use this function is to not use the hero function, as they both serve the same purpose, but are coming from different perspectives. If you force someone to use this function against their will, you will see their ugly demonic side. This is where we are easily agitated and disgusted by others if we stubbornly refuse to use it because of our ego's desire to use the hero function over the demon function. This is where you need to willingly use the demon function to flip it to its angelic archetype. Otherwise, you'll project demonic attributes onto the other guy. When you access the superego in a demonic, chaotic state, it is used for destruction, and you usually burn to the ground, metaphorically speaking, and occasionally, literally speaking, whatever it is that pushed you there. SE demons are prone to physical destruction. They tend to hit and break things and or people in their superego demonic state. However, if you can kill the ego and go into your superego angelically, it will reveal things you are blind to or unaware of and reveal mysteries of the universe. This is your own personal apocalypse where you experience enlightenment. Remember, apocalypse means to reveal or uncover. That is why the Apocalypse book is translated into English as the Book of Revelation. After you go through this apocalypse, you are then tested constantly to see if you are worthy to gain access to the fifth gateway to the self, or if you'll regress back into your old state or be enslaved to the beast where your soul is captured and controlled, often resulting in you worshiping the beast and taking one of its marks. This is the time that I refer to as walking through the valley of the shadow of death. This is the time when you'll be tested with things you've desired by Satans masquerading as angels of light. This could be done by people and or actual spiritual beings, both fallen angels and demons. They will try and convince you that you are God and we are all one, or that God doesn't exist, and show you some fantastical things. They will tempt you with money, fame, and power. They will test your fears to see if you are humble and willing to take up your cross and be able to face even death itself fearlessly. If you can prove yourself and pass these tests, which is not an overnight ordeal, this was 3.5 years of testing for me, in addition to overcoming the distrust of the trickster function, flipping it into the master function, then you'll gain access to the fifth gateway and find self. And even after that, you still have to maintain balance and harmony within to not regress and lose access. Before attempting to reach enlightenment in the fifth gateway, it is wise to have first faced your fears and insecurities and are able to aspire at any given moment. You have brought order to your mind and taken responsibility for yourself by incorporating the parent function in equilibrium with your critic function, which after many failed attempts and many nights of downward spirals results in wisdom and the function becoming the wise man. You have done your shadow work, where you dealt with all your past wounds and traumas and found forgiveness in your heart for yourself and for others and can let the past go. You no longer cling to attachments, both negative and positive, as many close relationships will be lost during the testing period. Not everyone will understand what you are going through and will walk away. and others will reveal that they never truly had your back. The spiritual journey can be lonely and isolating, so seek out others that are in the process as well to find understanding and support. There are many of us out there. If you think you are going crazy, you are not. This is the Great Awakening. The development of the trickster function allows for the child function to become miraculous. What was once innocent, a bit childish, and sometimes prone to tantrums, can now produce wonders as it has reached equilibrium with the master function. With this full awareness of all 8 cognitive functions and the ability to flip the archetypes from the negative to the positive by utilizing all the functions in balance and harmony with each other, and move fluidly from each side of the psyche as a whole, you will realize your true self, which is an entirely different personality type. The master function is the self's dominant function and takes the lead when you access the self through the 5th gateway of the trickster function, shifting the ego's hero function down a notch to the parental role, and the rest of the cognitive functions recalibrate. For example, my persona is of an INFJ with TE Trickster, which is now my TE Master, making my true self's lead dominant function extroverted thinking, and my parental role introverted intuition. Which means, based on orbital axes and the rules of cognitive stacks, my true self is an ENTJ. As C.S. Joseph likes to say, the INFJ is the tip of the spear. We lead the way. I don't think he was aware of just how right he was. INFJ's persona is of a paladin. Our shadow is a bard. Our soul is a gladiator. Our spirit an archivist. And our self is a field marshal. INFJs are the true commanders in charge, and you will often find us taking on the role of a Sigma, going against the grain of the consensus like lone wolves, creating paths that others will eventually follow in step. This slow shift in consensus occurs as more and more people experience what the INFJ has experienced and tried to explain to others with our TI child, but were told we were naive, ignorant, contradictory, was narcissistic because we valued our own thoughts over the experts, and or lacked empirical evidence. This meant we often went misunderstood and our thoughts discarded as unimportant and irrelevant and not worthy for consideration, wounding our inner child. They could not see our authority on the matter, and we did not care about the authority of others with our TE blind spot. However, as more and more people experience what we experienced, the tide begins to shift, and the group consensus begins to reflect what the INFJs had already claimed as true. Unfortunately, we rarely, if ever, get the credit. Usually, TE Dom egos hoard the information behind secrecies and walls of boundaries and paywalls so they can capitalize on what the INFJ was willingly offering up to society for free. When I mirror people, I mirror more than just their behaviors and attitudes and things that can be observed or felt, which is achieved through an SEFE combination. I mirror their complete cognitive stack and literally process information in the same manner as the other person. This is the self's version of TE. I can think like every single type. I was unaware that this is what I was doing until I understood the system behind our consciousness and mastered my TE trickster. My NIFE did this naturally, but I was unaware that I was processing information differently than from my normal state. When I am interacting with you, I will naturally begin to process information like you through my NIFE mirroring. but I would constantly hit people in their blind spot. This is what I have been doing my entire life, trying to help people reach their potential. I could always see it, but I didn't really know what it was that I was seeing. It was more of a knowing through claircognizance, which is my strongest spiritual gift and how I hear God most of the time. I had no idea that I was constantly hitting people in their blind spot, which means I often triggered people when I wasn't being the counselor that most people associate with INFJs. I was often seen as the trickster that was being projected onto me, rather than the good guy not wanting to take advantage of your weak point by covering your blind spot and making you aware of it. You cannot actively use a function you don't even know exists because you are blind to it, so you must be made aware of it first. As the saying goes, you don't know what you don't know, and our blind spot is the key to our highest potential and our true self. As much as I disagree with many things C.S. Joseph says these days and his bitter attitude towards INFJs, he is the reason I became aware of the trickster function and my blind spot. I owe him a thank you so I could reach my true potential. And almost 4 years ago, I watched his videos on the 4 sides of the mind days before I had my spiritual awakening, and he provided me with exactly what I needed to be able to face Don Talion, the 71st of 72 demons and a Duke of Hell with 36 legions of demons under his command for my first test. And it was a fucking doozy that damn near shattered my psyche and put me in the hospital from severe PTSD and paranoia after the fact. Had I not been prepared by his videos, I would have lost my mind. If you extrapolate this concept across all the personality types, you end up with the Quaternity Roundtable, where the INFJ is the real ENTJ, the ISFJ is the real ESTJ, the INTP is the real ESTP, the INTJ is the real ENFJ, the ISTP is the real ENTP, the ISTJ is the real ESFJ, the INFP is the real ESFP, the ISFP is the real ENFP, the ESTJ is the real INTJ, the ENTJ is the real ISTJ, the ESFP is the real ISTP, the ESFJ is the real INFJ, the ENFP is the real INTP, the ENFJ is the real ISFJ, the ESTP is the real ISFP, and the ENTP is the real INFP. I'm looking forward to everyone reaching their highest potential. One day, you will show me your real self and stop hiding behind the masks of the ego.
If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it.